media links and talk to people and grab drinks of water and, all those other things, because it turns out it takes energy to cast and to talk and to think up things on the fly. It's amazing how that works out.
Yep, just continuing to spread my link anywhere and everywhere that will accept it.
Nintendo's been doing it for almost 30 years at this point, so spread the link far and wide. I amuse myself. I just truly admit I amuse myself a bit too much. So the first thing that we have to go over, right, is a bit of rules discussion. Okay, Hobo and I are in charge of the tournament. True. However, we've already posted a tournament rules page. We've already expressed how the points are going to be done. We're going to determine who plays best of threes using rules that we already have in place. Also, over 4 weeks, all 8 teams are going to play against all other 8 teams for these best of threes. So even if we did stack the deck, which we're not, even if we did stack the order in which people play their best of threes, etc., for the league format, it wouldn't matter because everyone gets the chance to play against everyone anyways.
And they only ever play them once until the final.
Yep, you only get to play against people in a single best of 3 until the final, and the final will be top cut. So even if we were like horribly dastardly manipulative in figuring out who played against who by strength of schedule, etc., it literally doesn't change the end results. The end results are fully in control of the coaches and players that are involved. Is that enough of a disclaimer? Have we done the disclaiming well?
I believe so. The other thing is for that second half, or the final part, I believe the most fair way of doing it for the seeding for that is your seed is based off your score from the previous 4 weeks.
Yes, right? So we haven't talked about much because it's literally 5+ weeks away, but in the 5th week of this tournament, the top half, the top 4 students, will get to play a single elimination best of 3 tournament to decide who is the strongest student-mentor pairing. However, when that happens, we'll be going off of the in-league standings. So even if I think the number 1 seed should be number 3, it literally doesn't matter because we're going to be using how they seeded as a result of the points they accrued through the league. It is the rules had to be designed in a subjective way, right? And we had to format the tournament in a certain way that was subjective input, but our hands are actually off the wheel and not connected to the parking brake at this point. Like,
the only thing that we will be controlling moving forward, aside from making sure games are valid, is that mentors are working with the students and which maps are played each week. Beyond that is up to the individual players to succeed in their matchups.
Yep. So if you have like a week where you have 2 hard best of 3s or 2 easy best of 3s, that's just the way that it worked out. We did not do that on purpose. That's just how things happened. So now that we've gotten literally 4 minutes of disclaimers and explaining that we don't hate anybody or we're not wishing ill on anybody, it's time for us to engage in the fun topic of analysis. What do we think of the mentors, the students, their pairings, etc.? So we're going to start with this, right? I'm just going to list off the names of mentors, and we're going to talk about like how strong we think they are as coaches, maybe as players, etc. So we've got, I'm just going to quickly list them, and then we're going to go after them in order. So we've got Visixfan, Rynus, PranksterGangster, Norm, Humon, SatCitAnanda, Aicy, and Glaba. Okay, so we're just going to get into it. Like, what are your impressions of Visixfan, the first of these mentors? Like, just as a player, as a coach, what do you think?
To start off with, as a player, it's kind of a bit mixed. At times, he was some of the top, since he would just do non-stop games all day long against anyone who would play him. I want to say for like a solid 3 months back in, 2019, he was one of the few people doing ranked. Since then, he has gotten diminished a little bit. I don't know if that's by virtue of others becoming better, or if he's gotten rusty over the time. He's definitely shifted to playing more for fun, which is something that I can really appreciate. He's a
Yes.
lot of my interactions with him. He is a fun dude to be around. He's entertaining. I know he likes to do a lot with music. I'm hoping that he'll be able to be uh, very present to help WeirdRat moving forward with the tournament. And if nothing else, I think he will be able to not backseat game, but definitely backseat coach very effectively.
Yes. So I'm going to agree with the point that he is. I've actually met Visixfan. I've certainly talked to him a lot over the years. He's a guy who's very amiable. It's very hard to dislike him. Like he has a way of making talking to him be, at times like comfortable,
Self
easy,
rewarding.
self-rewarding. He can break down things, or maybe he just chooses to express things kind of clearly and simply
He'll
that
also be
I
able to help
doesn't.
motivate quite a bit.
Yes, and also I think this may be here's the thing, right? He's not the strongest player among the coaches, but if he can motivate himself by the fact that he has a mentor, well, not a mentor, by the fact that he has a student and someone looking up after him, I think he has a lot of interesting qualities as a coach. Like he does have that willingness to just say, "All right, I'm just gonna cheese. This game is gonna go short. I'm just gonna kill you," which that may be all that you need, right? Like that if you keep the game plan simple and short, then you can maybe pursue it to a higher level more quickly. He also can play longer macro games, but I think
Definitely.
he has a desire to win quickly. So that would be the only fault that I would see, would be if he makes a decision that, hey, for this week we're going to be doing these. I hope he doesn't get one dimensional or one tracked for his students' sake. But we'll get to the students later. We've got to answer the pressing chat question. Could Visixfan beat me in a fight? No. There is no way. There is a negative chance that I would lose that fight. Like you think that's all banter. Physics and I have met each other. It's not happening. I would absolutely
In Little
stop.
Wargame or in person?
Oh, in person. Could he beat me in a fight in Little Wargame? I'm just gonna say I beat him in Team League, but there are also contextual factors to that. Like, for those of you who don't know, when we were Hobo and I were on the same team for Team League, so he can attest to this. I basically was like pre-scouting everybody and all of their builds and tendencies and like what styles they liked, and if they lost the game, what they lost to, and if they won a game but looked shaky, where like I was deep in the replay analysis. So like, yeah, I beat Visixfan because I had seen that he did one build like 2 weeks in a row. As for, yeah, Physics would definitely not double leg Itano and put him in a dance 30 seconds. There is no way. Like, First off, all I'd have to do is sprawl. Second off, like, I'll do some Muay Thai shit. I'll just bring my knee in. I'll crunch his nose in. Anyways, that's not relevant to Little Wargame. But the chat asked the question, so we had to answer it. Chat, if you have any other questions about people, bring them up, and we'll be more than happy to answer them.
Just
Hobo,
don't
do you
ask where
think
my
you could
ads
take...
went.
Yeah, no. Unless it's WoW, in which case, if you could make the ads go away, that's really good on your part. Rynus.
Yes.
I think he's the third strongest player among the coaches, but
I do have
crucially, he's the only mech main, which that's insight. Like, it's very hard to fight against the Rynus ball.
I do need to take a step back whenever I look at Rynus, because objectively he is a strong player, but at times his personality can rub me the wrong way. But I will try to step back and be as neutral and unbiased as possible when assessing him.
Oh no, we're gonna lean into the bias. You're going the wrong way on this, because again, like, we spent 3.5 minutes explaining to people that we can't possibly bias things too much further because the rules
True.
are like they're already off wheel. Actually, his personality is extremely relevant to the question of coaching. Because
He's
I'll
a
just let you know
very
from behind the scenes, I've never heard Rynus speak in voice chat, but I've seen his student Derpo on quite a bit, and I don't want to get too far into their relationship yet.
If anything, I would
But
say
yeah.
there's a diode. As motivating positively and encouraging that Visix is, I almost feel like this may be the opposite. Through sheer force of will, trying to be the not quite disappointing father figure, but trying to motivate the player through saying you can do that better, or so on and so forth. I think it will motivate the player, but I don't know how well that will affect some positive relationship. We saw already when Derpo woke up and saw the astounding Christmas news that he was paired with Rynus, he was a bit taken aback. It's going to be interesting to see how that turns out, though.
Rynus strikes me very much. I'm in his Discord. If you don't know about Rynus's Discord, just ask him for the link. There's a link in the main Discord's content notice board for it. But he is this guy. He. If you look at the Discord, I think it's actually a good reflection of Rynus, like how he approaches Little Wargame. I'm not gonna say him as a person. I don't know him as a person, but he has like a section for Little Wargame terminology, a section for good replays, a section for analysis, a section for helping new players. Like, he also signed up as a coach. He's clearly interested in helping people. I will agree, however, that Rynus,
his personality just comes off a bit rough at times.
He has a well done son kind of vibe to him. With like, oh, you played well. Oh, congrats. Like, no, but the congrats means a lot because he rarely says it, but you know, congrats. But as a coach from the play standpoint, he's the only main, like the only mech maining player here.
There
So
are
if you're
others
Derpo,
who do play mech, but not as their main.
Oh yeah,
Aicy and Glaba, extremely competent with mech, not their main though.
yeah. I mean, with Rynus, like, you expect that Derpo's going to be learning about the Rynus ball. Let's just put it that way.
I think he may take it another direction though. He may go down the beast route, because I don't know if you've seen some of Rynus's beast games. He is a very strong player. Translating the mech micro over to beast makes him very powerful.
Oh yeah, I could see that. So our next mentor, probably, I don't know if I want to say the weakest or second weakest as a player, but we got to talk about PranksterGangster, because this is a guy who has brute forced his macro with the aid of a mod and his own dedication very, very quickly. And he plays Beast, which, you know, has its own, and that has its ups and downs, and it's a very wolf snake heavy style. But I have my concerns for PranksterGangster, because I think that Ruadh is a good pick for him. But what do you think about PranksterGangster as a player and as a coach? Where do you see this going?
So, I guess one of the things to keep in mind with PranksterGangster is a lot with what does a professional StarCraft player do once they retire? They're no longer young enough to really be able to handle the 4,000 APM needed to play StarCraft 1 or StarCraft 2. They go into either mentorship or casting, because it's a lot easier to look at a game with a clear mind if you're not playing it. Think of observing a chess game or anything else along the lines of sports. You know they should have dipped left instead of dipping right. I think he's going to be able to very effectively say what you're supposed to do, more so than practice it as in terms of something like micro. That being said, like you were saying, he has been improving as a melee player himself, so who knows, maybe both him and his student will be able to up the ranks by the end of this, potentially taking games off Humon or SatCit or maybe even others.
So your point is that it could be a symbiotic relationship.
Where they both
this would be a circumstance where they're both learning, like, and maybe PranksterGangster has to push himself even harder to learn. That said, like, I want to keep an eye on this. It doesn't seem as promising. I'm not counting him out. He definitely has improved massively, but there's a lot of ifs that you've got to kind of suck up to go with that. Like, yeah, if you're a former great player in those other games, then you come in, it's easy to do coaching or analysis or something like that. It's easier as a career path, as a transition path, but
or even as a regular coach. If you know the stuff, then
on a come up. That's my point, is that we have to assume that, like, he's on the come up and then he's like doing this extra work. And if he does, I'll tip my hat. I'll say that I'm wrong, you know, that I didn't have the right view of it. But by the way, it's good to have any of these people as your mentor. This is explicitly in the context of the other mentors, right? No one misinterpret this to say that I think that PranksterGangster is a bad mentor, a bad coach. It's just the relative strength of them. We'll see, is how I would phrase it.
Mm-hmm.
The next one is Norm. I think this one is going to be. I actually, he's not going to like this. I actually don't like the idea. I am concerned for whoever Norm coaches. Now, this will sound crazy because Norm has done impromptu coaching. He's done videos where clearly there's a dramatic improvement on people based off of 1 or 2 sessions. And he plays, as his name implies, this very normal, resolved, like sturdy rack style. But I actually think that might be it might be masquerading as sturdiness when it's inflexibility. What do you think of Norm as a mentor?
I think it's going to be out of all the players, I think he plays multiple races some of the least. I know he has started to go into beasts, but from a knowledge perspective, as playing for the different ones, I think he may be at a slight disadvantage because of his own limitations. Not that he's incapable of doing stuff, but he likes his comfort zone, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, this is a guy who, here's the thing, he definitely puts in the time and he puts in the work. He's on he's on at a very high level. Like, he plays a lot of games. He beats people like Hero of Ages. I've seen him take games off of other people who are on this list. You know, he uses mages against Rynus's like giant ball of units, and he plays. You know, SatCitAnanda is also in Norm's Discord and is there learning with and alongside him. So I'm not saying that Norm's level as a player is low, but I'm worried again about the flexibility. Like, if Norm has to teach, you know, if he finds out the Cladorhiza's natural fit is beast, you know, how does that work out? But you can't discount Norm as a player. Moving on, I'm going to be throwing to you on this one. I don't even know how to properly set him up. It's gotta be Humon.
So, I think this is one of the most interesting ones, only because we don't know what to expect from him. One of Humon's biggest characteristics is looking into, let's say, a Lego set, and somehow making completely different thing out of it. If you look at the editor, he finds ways to manipulate the stuff to get what he wants. You wouldn't see it right away, but all of a sudden now it exists in the game. So one of the things with him is we might see unique builds come out of him. And one of the biggest issues there is, especially for people who are learning, they're going to be learning against standard build orders. So, like, how to go against 1 Rax expansion, how to go against a fast expansion 2 den, how do you stop a double mill rush after the second. You can prepare for all of those just fine, but if you spend all your time practicing that, especially for some of the newer players like Ruadh or Levinsky, then all of a sudden you're fighting Rax. Okay, this is standard 1 Rax opening. Oh wait, there's an invisible werewolf or an invisible dragon in the middle of my worker line. What do I do now? So things like that, I think, may make Humon and BabyMight one of the most deadly pairs.
Now, JY provides some interesting counterpoint here where he says, I wouldn't say it this way. I'm just reading what JY said. He says, when in reality, Hobo and ItanoCircus hyping Humon up, when in reality, Humon students screwed, just about to become a test dummy. Which, again, that would be the other side that I would worry about for a Humon student, is that if Humon is like, oh, don't worry, man, it's the Humon special. Archer catapult, not Archer catapult.
Soldier gyrocraft.
Like Wolf Gatling gun, soldier gyrocraft. Like, you ever seen dragons and catapults work together? You have now. Like, that does require a level of knowledge and technical execution that, yeah, you have an advantage by throwing the other student off, but you'd have to really wrangle them.
But the other thing is the fact that
throw off enough.
Build would be so different between each one. He'd need to learn a completely new setup each time.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it will be a lot.
It's like showing someone the magic trick and too many times. Like, the first time is impressive, but the 5th time maybe they catch you like flashing a card you weren't supposed to that gives up the trick.
So here's my main thing with this. If the two of them can work well together and synergize and figure out a way to get a unique build for each one, then they have a strong chance. It's all about if they can have the time to be able to put in the work to get those. I'm just going to be back in one moment.
Yep. So the next one then I'll kind of set up. And we'll get Hobo's thoughts when he returns. So the next one we're going to talk about is SatCitAnanda. This is a guy who is in Norm's Discord, and he's on Discord, like the general chat, quite often. You can hear him, you can talk to him. He has a more cerebral bend to how he looks at the game, but in terms of the strength as an individual player, I wouldn't say that he's even is even the top half fair to say among these. Like, I don't think he's stronger than Norm, Aicy, Glaba, or Rynus, but he certainly has like the flexibility of mind to approach these things. So the way I would characterize SatCitAnanda as a coach is that as a player, maybe he's just like in the bottom half of the coaches. In terms of his best of 3 prep or his game prep or his ability to look up people, this seems like a person who would be able to make those preparations. And the reason I say that is that this is a guy who's like in his off time. I think this is very telling, so I'll reveal something behind the scenes. It's that SatCitAnanda is the kind of guy who his ability to solve chess puzzles is much higher than his own stated ability to play chess the game. And if you look at best of 3s or like people matchups as matchups between peoples as a puzzle, as opposed to play a standard game, play a standard game, play a standard game. Oh, did you win? Did you lose? Well, that's the best of 3. I feel like this is where SatCitAnanda could shine up more as a coach than as a player. Any chance that Hobo has returned? If not, we're good. So the thing is, I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent here. This is where actually the difference between, I think the difference between the mentor's strength as a player and strength as a coach is most sharply pronounced. So a bit was said earlier about how PranksterGangster is this person who himself is on the come up in Melee, and he has this way of thinking about the game, but it tends to be in line with how he actually plays. And that's a very common thing for people to coach what they know. And if they're a strong player, what they know as a player is, if it's good enough for me, it should be good enough for you. But what I would be wanting to get out of SatCitAnanda would be to see, okay, is your preparation, is your ability as a coach, is your ability to look up matchups, or is your theory crafting about the game important? Basically, Hobo, if we have you back.
I am now back.
The TLDR is that for SatCitAnanda, I'll set it up like this. All of the coaches, of the mentors, this is the person who has could most strongly emphasize the difference between himself as a player and himself as a coach. Because I think that SatCitAnanda, more than these other coaches, definitely offers more as a coach than as a player. Where would you sit with that?
I personally do not know SatCit overly well.
Okay.
I know I've seen him around over the years. I've not interacted with him a lot. Probably since the past 1 or 2 weeks is the most I've ever talked to him.
Okay.
I do remember playing a lot of games with him in the past. And if what you're saying about his personality is true, then I think you may just be right, where he might be one of the strongest coaches.
What's interesting too is that, well, we'll get to the player matchups, but I think that his student is a very apt choice, given his what I see as his demonstrated potential for coaching. But why talk about potential? Well, we could talk about actuality. Our 7th mentor is Aicy. Yeah, probably the strongest player here. Come on, of all of the students and all the coaches, Aicy has got to be the strongest player here.
I would agree with you here, yep. I think Glaba and Rynus could take games off. I think Norm could take games off, but I still think in series, Aicy would be top dog here. And probably favored to win a tournament if the mentors were the ones playing.
Yes, but unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately for the students, Aicy is not playing as a student. He is not playing in a who is the best tournament. He is playing in the mentor tournament. He has taken up the role as a coach. What do you think? Does his dominant play experience translate into coaching?
I think it may. One thing to consider when looking at this matchup in particular is over the past while, AC has been one of the main people looking at balance. He has had to be able to look at how units interact, how different things interact, how things work together to make something either overpowered or underpowered, and how to address that. I think that deep understanding of the fundamentals of the game and how each and everything works may be the thing that pushes him into massive advantage territory for coaching, if he can effectively convey that to his student. And in this case, the student he has is a very abled person, JY, who's constantly knocking himself down, but I think he does have the tools and the capability and at least the experience in the game to learn the stuff from AC and potentially do very well.
I actually am going to also add that AC, I've only heard this from him, so take it with a grain of salt, but I think that this story might express that he could be a very good coach, and here's what it is. AC, sometimes he talks about his time playing StarCraft 2, and once he was in Discord talking about it, and he said that he actually just, when he practiced games, he would just play, macro on the ladder, he would just play default games. When he knew he had a series to play, he would prep for an opponent and prep builds and the series for that opponent. And by his own admission, it allowed him to beat players that he thought were better than him. So it shows a combination of humility to not just ram your strength into theirs and just see what happens. And also, he's preparing against opponents. Like, surely that translates over into coaching. If he's going to look at, like, if he takes his student success seriously, then he's going to, that shows that he has the mindset to adapt, to understand that there is series planning, there is preparing for a specific opponent in a way that if you're just a player and you're like, no, if I play a good game, I'll beat him on his good game. It shows that mindset. I think that's a really good sign for him as a mentor. He's probably the number one, if not the number one, definitely, like, you can't deny top two coaches for this tournament.
I would agree. He just has the skill set needed, in my opinion.
Then after that, our final mentor is going to be Glaba. Now, I've seen him play Beast versus Mech very successfully.
And his mentor, his student is also a Beast player.
Yes, and I've also seen Glaba prepare different builds for different matches, and I've seen him take games off of people, like I said, like Slammer 4, people like Destroy Call, people like Rynus.
Dragon Archer C.
There's an elephant in the room, though, for Glaba. It's not that I think that he is a bad Beast player. It's not that at all. However, from a coaching perspective, I do worry about the amount of time he's going to be able to provide. It's to a greater extent than we brought up with AC, because he is a developer. And as you said, this is a passion project. This is something that we're all doing. But Glaba not only has whatever his regular 9 to 5, we did an interview, I can talk about this. He not only has school and work as a transition coming up soon, where he, by his own admission in that interview, said that he might be working 50, 60 hours a week if he goes to that. But he's also the developer for Little Wargame. Do you think that time is going to be a factor for Glaba?
I think it's going to have effects. If it doesn't negatively affect the student, it may negatively affect the rate at which we're getting stuff added to the game. It all depends on how things end up working on his side. But I do think there is that potential of spreading yourself too thin, so to speak. It remains to be seen if that's what's going to happen or not. But the other thing is that therx already at a baseline is one of the top students, just at the base skill line. So maybe he doesn't need as much of the coaching and guidance, since with the mechanisms already down, a lot of it is reaction and game knowledge. So just to use a spreadsheet you made, for example, knowing not to get that +1 damage, anything past +1 on catapults, just for a random example.
Okay.
So Glaba won't have to spend as much time grinding the mechanics with therx as much as it is teaching him the reactions to, if you see this, go for that, or whatever the case may be.
So that's actually a beautiful transition into the next part. Is we're going to talk about now the students, and then rather than go through the list a third time, we'll talk about like the students in conjunction with their mentor. Like, is it a good fit? What's the strength of the student, their weaknesses? You did a good job there outlining therx with glaba, and I would agree, but I'd add a wrinkle to it, which is I actually think that teaching somebody the mechanical side of the game is the easy part of the game. That's not to say it's easy to improve in that area.
I
Far
believe
from.
that takes less time, though, in terms of depending on where you are in the game.
Well, it also requires less. I would say it requires less less on the part of the coach to communicate. Like if you're working with someone who's never played an RTS before, it will take an initial frustration to teach them like, okay, here's how control groups work, and this is the basic concept of macro that you want to be going for, and this is why expansion is good and keeping buildings busy is good. And obviously you can work your whole life trying to perfect macro, but that's pretty easy. That's like almost, those are conversations you've had before in your head, right? Whereas with glaba, if you're trying to teach therx who already has this baseline knowledge, these matchup dependent items, these little extra tidbits, that's either new knowledge you have to find yourself, or it's old knowledge that you have to repurpose by finding the weakness in the existing player. Like it's very hard to get someone who is at a novice level to an intermediate level compared to getting a beginner to a novice level. So I actually want to go to the next student, JY, who's partnered with Aicy. Yeah, I see him in the chat. He's excited.
Just looking at Super Monkey Nerd on the Twitch chat for a second, pointing out that a lot of the players here are a bit more experienced. One of the reasons for that is, again, because of logistical restraints. It's not so much that we wanted this mid-range of players to be the focus of the students, as much as logistically hindered. We are only 2 people doing this for only a couple hours out of the week, because, again, we have all of our lives going on. So we're limited by how many people we can oversee and try to get done, so we only end up with 8 mentors. And the fairest way to get to make sure that the pairs were not biased or imbalanced or have people have claims of anything being unfair or unruly is by having the mentors pick their own students. So out of all the students, there was a large number of people who had experience and a large number of people who were brand new. I think there's a pretty decent balance between people who are brand new and people who have experience in the game that were end up being picked.
And I'll also address the uncomfortable side of it, which is I would have no, the idea, yes, conceptually would be to grab people who are brand new. However, the reality is that when you have people who are brand new, it's also hard to determine what their level of engagement is, which is something that mentors are picking up on and are seeing as relevant. Yes, it would be ideal for new dedicated people for the 5 weeks potentially to show up and be selected, but of all the responses, we only had, I think, like you said, 15 or 16 responses. So half the people were picked. And again, we have people like, and we'll get to this, we have people like, yeah, maybe you haven't seen Levinsky or Ruadh or BabyMight. Like, there are people who have been playing a while who are at like that intermediate level. And there are also people who aren't at that intermediate level or maybe a step below. But short of telling people you must pick not these people, it wasn't really doable. Like we have to make sure, again, as Hobo said, if we could have 16 mentors and extra tournament staff and made it longer, we would have done that. However, we didn't have all the responses in for even some of these players because of the Google sign-up form until yesterday. That makes, basically there are impracticalities in tournament organization, and this is what we have. I think that's the best way to say it, frankly.
Mm-hmm. Moving on to continuing with the conversation here.
Yeah. So Aicy and JY actually is the extension of what I was saying about glaba and therx. There's no denying that JY has a baseline level of skill and understanding of the game and mechanics and things like that. But he's shown some weird desires of things he doesn't want to do or doesn't like. I actually worry about that for AC because breaking habits is a lot harder. Breaking habits to put in new ones is a lot harder than using existing habits or making new ones entirely, rather.
Mm-hmm.
That said, JY knows who AC is and respects him as a player. So even though I think you can respect someone as a coach but not as a player, most people don't tend to do that. And I think that there's no question for JY that like AC is a better player than he is, and AC is a better coach, and AC is his coach. So I think his ego is going to be out of the way for this student-mentor pairing.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Super Monkey Nerd, people who weren't picked will, of course, get the 2,000 gold priority in future tournaments. And then additionally, we've got other perks for them so that, again, you don't feel like you're punished for trying to sign up and then not having been selected.
The next tournament will be a lot easier in terms of the organization, I think. It will be run a bit differently, so we should be able to have more than just the 8 pairs playing in it.
Indeed. And so the next group, basically, that we're going to talk about here is going to be SatCitAnanda and Levinsky. This is probably the, like, if you were to theory craft the appropriate coach to student in terms of level of skill and familiarity, this would be, I think, perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's not to say Levinsky is a great player. I don't know much about Levinsky at all.
There's a couple of these players I've never even heard of. I've not heard of Ruadh, I've not heard of Clad, I've not heard of BabyMight, Levinsky.
But I actually think that SatCitAnanda Levinsky is an excellent contrast to what I was saying about Aicy JY, where I've not heard of Levinsky. I've not seen Levinsky play many games. But SatCitAnanda is also a person I think is stronger as a coach than as a player. But if Levinsky is the skill level I think they are, SatCitAnanda is unquestionably better than them as a player as well. So you've got this person who's new, who wants to learn, which is why they signed up, teamed up with a person who wants to coach, like explicitly enjoys coaching, particularly enjoys coaching new people. The baseline is a lot to come up from. The floor is really low. Like the potential floor of where Levinsky's starting skill is very low.
We could see some of the biggest changes in a lot of the newer players.
Oh yeah, if you had to look for a dark horse to just come up out of nowhere, I'm not going to say that Levinsky could win the whole thing, but if you think, oh, Levinsky doesn't have a chance of getting to the top 4 of week 5, you'd be very surprised. Like, it is easier to start from nothing than to start with the expectations and built-in
especially
concepts.
With bad habits. One thing I do really love about the setup for this tournament is, in theory, it will help some of the players overcome one of the biggest hurdles inside RTS games, where they try to learn on their own, and they do something, and it works, but it doesn't work because it's supposed to work, it works because their opponent did something wrong too. So I'm hoping that something along the lines of this with the experienced mentor, they can help the student differentiate between something that works because it's good and it's the correct thing to do versus something that works because of the actual situation.
I'd also like to comment on something that's a bit unrelated, but in a similar vein. Super Monkey Nerd reached out in the chat, and then Glaba mentioned very correctly, if you ever want to practice with the mentors, you can almost certainly just message them when they're online and play with them. Practice partners are hard to come by anyways, and you can also practice with other mentor-student pairs. Absolutely. Like, here's the thing. Let's say that one of these students has to play against 2 of these other students for 2 best-of-3s that week, and you weren't selected for the tournament. Dude, of course they want to play against you. They can show you all of the things that they want to show you. They can practice against you as much as they want. It doesn't give away any information.
Mm-hmm.
So if you weren't selected, like we didn't do this on purpose, but almost unintentionally, you've got some gold, might as well stick around anyways. And all of these newer students are gonna want someone to play against and practice against that aren't each other. Might as well be you. Like, sign up and go for it. Now, the next student pairing that we're gonna go over is Norm is paired up with Cladorhiza.
I don't know
Now,
anything about their skill level, so it will be interesting to see.
yes, I don't know what the fit will be like for Norm with anybody, because Norm has like a combination of Rynus's well done son guy. He's got like the middle ground between Rynus's well done son view and Visixfan's come on man, we're gonna do it this way. So I don't know how that's going to work temperamentally. I don't know how that's going to work in terms of styles. I don't know if Cladorhiza is like, maybe they have the skill set that's better for Beast, but Norm is a Rax player. Like, is Norm a player who coaches what he plays, or is he a coach? Like, or is he a player who can additionally coach? And I think that distinction is going to be very relevant for Norm's student Cladorhiza.
And just while we're also on the topic, I just want to reiterate that a lot of this right now is just the gut reaction assessments and analysis. It's just our face reactions to a lot of these pairs. All of this could be turned up on its heads a week and a day from now when the first games start going out. And it turns out that Rynus is actually not only the god of mech, god of coaching.
I like JY's comment in the little wargame chat where he says Norm does have that high level micro macro, but that isn't something you can really pass on. That comes from practice, and that's kind of what I'm concerned about. Is that I don't know where Norm's coaching starts and where Norm being the player ends.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's the thing that, again, we could be completely wrong about. We'll just have to wait.
Right now, all this is speculation.
Oh, of course, that's the nature of
analysis. We'll be able
analysis.
to see the medal pretty soon.
Yeah, it's not called future prediction. It's called post-selection analysis. Like, we could be wrong. It's entirely possible. Moving on, we've got PranksterGangster paired with Ruadh. Now, we talked a bit about this, so I want to gloss over it. But PranksterGangster is this guy who's on the Melee map come up himself.
Mm-hmm.
And Ruadh is this person who is on, hasn't been on very much. This might work only because both of them are trying to improve as players at the same time. So this is actually the exception where I think that if PranksterGangster can only coach to the level he plays, this will be perfect for Ruadh. Normally I wouldn't say that. Normally you would want the mentor to actually be like a really dominant player who can explain what they're doing and coach that way. Or you want them to be a person who's different as a coach than as a player. But if they're both grinding to improve, I think PranksterGangster can actually pass that on to Ruadh as we're on the same path. Here's what I did to get past that hurdle.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any other thoughts to add on Ruadh as a player or on the synergy between both of them?
Without a lot of knowledge on him as a player and his current skill level, it's going to be tough.
No, it's speculation. I mean, we could all be wrong 2 weeks from now. It's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The next one is... No, go on.
I do think it's going to be interesting to see how Prankster compares to... Whoa, 1 second. I think it's going to be interesting to see how it compares. How his ability to improve himself is going to translate to helping another improve.
Okay.
Sorry, I was just trying to set up a game to have playing in the background while people were watching, but apparently the map was old vanilla, not AA4.
There's also replays. You could just go through replays and show something. So while you're doing that, one of the last pairings we're going to talk about is, again, Rynus, but with Derpo. So what's interesting about Derpo is that Derpo is another guy that is kind of like Humon. He spends a lot of time in the editor, and if you haven't played some of his maps, you should. His campaign is worth playing if you're new to RTS games.
Mhm.
And if you are not, and you want something that is more micro intensive and team oriented, he's got Dungeon Delvers or DD, which is basically his old autocast test map for boss interactions. That's all really cool stuff. It has nothing to do with Melee Little War Game, unfortunately,
Well,
or
here's
very,
a
very thin overlap, if at all.
just gonna put up a replay between me and WeirdRat while we talk.
Excellent. Okay. So with that, the one area that I see is that Rynus, if he teaches Derpo mech, which I think he will as a point of pride, right? Almost certainly.
I think he
Um,
could go down the beast route, though.
ooh, okay.
I do think that's a
Derpo has
possibility.
already voiced. Well, Derpo's already voiced his displeasure, and if there's an offset between what the coach wants and the student wants, that doesn't bode well, right?
Correct.
Especially if we're talking about these like synergistic coach-student relationships, or theory crafting these positive pairings elsewhere. Far be it from me to tell them what to do. I think it would be you'd be missing out on an opportunity if your coach is Rynus and you don't learn how to make the Rynus ball.
Yeah.
That would be like studying in a kitchen and then never learning how to fry an egg. Like you've missed something there. I don't know what, but you've missed it.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're gonna get actually to perhaps one of the rockiest student pairing teachings, or student mentor pairings, which is WeirdRat is the student for Visixfan. Now you have a game against WeirdRat that you're attempting to load up in the background.
Yeah, it's playing now.
Yep. What do you think of WeirdRat? Like as a player, where would you put his skill level?
I'd say somewhere between humon and therx, if I had to use other players as references.
Yeah, and those are good references considering who we have as mentors and students in the tournament. Those are both relevant names. So I have a question with regards to that. If that's the case, do you think we talked about how Visix has this like amiable personality, and obviously he knows how to go for the throat. Do you think that's a good matchup with WeirdRat? Because if you're talking about this possibly small skill difference between the two of them,
Well,
and it's not that Visix is bad. It's just I don't imagine that the skill gap is so different between the two of them that it commands respect the way that like JY and Aicy does, for instance.
So I think what it comes down to is this. If I hope JY is fine with me saying it, as I am playing a replay. One of his biggest weaknesses is he knows that he's supposed to attack, but he doesn't fully grasp the times when to attack, when not to attack, when to defend, a lot of those kind of stuff. But he knows what to do and how to do it. It's just a matter of when you do it. I'm hoping to see Visix help work with him there and trying to.
You mean WeirdRat, right?
Yeah, WeirdRat. WeirdRat tends to do things at a slightly incorrect time. Just for one thing, if he doesn't get a lot of damage done with his attacks, he likes to do harassment attacks. But if they don't get the damage, then he opts to kind of turtling almost, which is not something that will help you get. Just a second. It's not something that's going to help you against someone like, let's say, a mech player. If you let the mech player sit and you're sitting yourself, then you're just going to lose. Or if it goes into a macro style game. Potentially, Visix very aggressive early game style may help that. That way he doesn't have to worry about going to the macro end. So that could work well. As far as the skill level difference, I don't actually think it's that far between those two.
Okay. You think it's actually so there's this idea in other sports called the player's coach, which is not the person who sits down with the analysis and breaks down everything, the way that I or the way that I enjoy doing things. But it's more like No. When you coach somebody, you're coaching a human being. You've got to make that human being feel good about how they're playing and their decisions and get them comfortable. So you're leaning more into if physics can make WeirdRat comfortable, then he can kind of unlock what WeirdRat already has. Less than he's going to build WeirdRat up to a new level.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Very interesting. So with that, I mean, we've done all of this. We've talked about all of these people. We've talked about all of these coaches. We've talked about the students and their interactions with their coaches. We've done all of that. That's boring. Here's what we're really going to do now. We're going to get your top 2. Like, if you had to pick who the finalists are going to be, who are they going to be? Which pairing of mentor students would you imagine right now, before any games played, and don't worry, I'll be participating as well, would you imagine are going to be in there?
I think it would
And
be
why?
down to 3 players, honestly, with a coin toss between all 3 of them. I would say Glaba and therx, Aicy and JY, and then Rynus and Derpo.
Okay. And why? Is that because of the strength of the coaches? Like, what's your reasoning? What would you go with here?
Well, to start with Rynus and Derpo, the biggest thing with them, or with him at least, is the fact that if he can teach the Rynus ball is something that even experienced, like, upper level players, AC and Glaba, myself, you, struggle with a lot. So
definitely a hierarchy of power in those names, but okay, I get your point.
Basically meaning that if Glaba can get Derpo to do even 3/4 of the strength of his Rynus ball, then I think that will be challenging for all of the other opponents to deal with. As for AC and JY, I think AC's bottomless pit of understanding of the game can lead to insights, and if he can convey that to JY, might make him one of the best knowledge-based players in a matchup. Okay. As for therx and Glaba, in part because of Glaba's just enthusiasm for having therx, I think is going to be a really nice synergy. And if they can bounce off each other and really get his practice in, therx to be able to practice and learn, then I think they have the ability to do very well.
Okay. No one's going to like who I'm going to say. But these are in no particular... Let's see. I think I have a third. But, okay. Here's how I'm going to go. I think Visixfan WeirdRat is definitely in this top 3. Only because it's not that I think Visixfan is a great coach or a dominant player relative to the other coaches. And it's not that I think WeirdRat has the strongest starting level. But WeirdRat has a pretty good starting level. And more importantly, Visixfan has a lot of time. He's on quite a bit. And he has exactly the mentality to solve the exact issue that you said that WeirdRat has. Like, it's a one-to-one, like, missing puzzle piece to nearly completed puzzle fit. And if you have that, like, I'm not gonna say the sky is the limit, but you can overcome a lot. I like Norm and Cladorhiza. The reason being, I've seen Cladorhiza's game. Cladorhiza, by the way they play, seems to just play like a very straight, if they're playing, seems to play a very like straightforward game. I don't think that Norm's ability, like lack of variability, is going to matter so much if there's this good student mix. Like if there's this good fit. Like, oh, I'm just going to teach you this basic style. Well, what about, prep and all of that? No, not as much a concern. We're just going to play this solid style. And I think that a very solid style has more barriers that other people have to get over or overcome. And this is not to impugn the honor of the Derpo's possible Rynus ball, but I do think that Aicy JY is very strong here. But I think in putting that in, I have to explain why I don't put others in. So I think Aicy JY is a good fit because Aicy's on quite a bit. JY is on quite a bit. So we're not worried about how much activity they're going to have, like if they're going to meet or not be able to meet. They're going to be there, they're going to be active. Now we're talking about JY, who's this person who's got this incomplete game, and he recognizes that he's got this incomplete game, and he also has this braggart way of him that he wants to show that, hey, he's probably even better than some of these coaches. Aicy is the coach that he knows he's not better than. Aicy is the person that he knows more about the game than he does.
Mhm.
And he respects him on a player can beat me level. So that might be enough, might be enough to break JY of habits. But I have to explain why I didn't pick other people. Like, if Rynus and Derpo play, it almost seems like you can counter pick or counter build or counter play against if Derpo just goes for mech all of the time. So there's possible abuse there. Also, surviving until you have the Rynus, like survive until X doesn't tend to work as well as the strategy when you're dealing with people who are more inclined to make bad decisions or have mechanical errors getting up to that point. And that's just the nature of being a student in this, is that you probably aren't of the level where you can say your mechanics are flawless. So I'm worried that 3/4 of a Rynus ball isn't a Rynus ball. It's like a Rynus trapezoid. You know, it's not quite there. Humon, like, I bigged him up as a coach. I don't know where Levinsky is starting. And if Levinsky is starting at the bottom, yeah, you might be an amazing coach and get them to get to the top half of the tournament. But saying that you'll be top 3 is, I don't know, dude. Like, maybe, but there's a lot that you have to bank on there. Glaba, again, really strong player, knows a lot about the game from a lot of different angles, and therx has a good baseline. I just don't know how much time Glaba has. So it's like, for me, it's how active the coach can be, and their synergy is almost more important than the level of skill that the player starts with. So like I said, it's going to be Visixfan and WeirdRat, and these are not in order. Visixfan and WeirdRat, Norman Cladorhiza, and I think Aicy and JY. Those were, if I had to pick 3, those are the 3 I would pick.
I think that's reasonable. Do you think there's going to be any new styles coming out of this that might be applicable to some of the higher competitiveness levels, so to speak?
Well, my hope is that the coaches that get involved will get involved in playing to, like, determine they'll want to give each other, they want to beat each other, right? Yeah, they're using the students as a proxy, but the mentors want to beat each other. I think that if we're going to see any of that hybridization that you talked about and that other people have been chatting about, you know, here and there as murmurs for a while, we're going to be talking about people like Humon, right? It's got to be people like Humon. I don't know how you can avoid talking about that. Like, it's literally called the Humon special for a reason. Yep. So that's where I would expect to see it. I would actually not expect that kind of thing from, like, let's say Aicy's team Aicy JY, or glaba therx, only because they're already, like, they don't have to, I'm not gonna say they don't have to resort to it. I don't want to make it sound like it's a trick, but why reinvent the wheel? You can just teach the wheel as is. And maybe the reinvented wheel is stronger, but that's for other people to figure out. Like, why would you go into that area, basically? I don't expect Norm or Rynus to be doing something brand new like that. If anyone would, it would be in order. I would say Humon, and then SatCit, and then PranksterGangster. Only because Humon is known for it. SatCit at a theory crafting level might find it interesting. And PranksterGangster's on the come up himself, so if he finds something that's finding success while he's on the come up, then he might teach his student that, but that is a very distant third possibility. So with that, I think we went over everything. It's time to see who's right and who's wrong. Do you have any closing thoughts or anything you want to mention before we kick this off?
One thing I would like to mention is if over the course of this there's anyone who would like to start to get into casting or things like that, or would like to help with the next tournament, the more hands we have helping with the tournament, the more participants we can have. So, over the course of the next 5-6 weeks, if someone's like, hey, I want to participate in helping with tournaments, feel free to reach out to myself or Itano, and we can try to see if you can help us.
Yeah, absolutely. And just as a final note, in case anyone missed it earlier, we're going to be kicking off the mentor tournament, week 1, the map you'll play on, and the opponents you'll have for your best of 3s will be given to you next Saturday. So for now, get familiar with your coach, play against other students, and as we said, anyone who wasn't selected, you will of course get your 2,000 gold compensation. Mentors will be getting the 3,500 gold for signing up. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and any final questions in the chat, I think, is the appropriate way to end this. I mean, you've got Hobo and myself right here. This is a golden opportunity. If it were any more golden, you could buy it for in-game currency. Super Monkey Nerd wants to know who won between yourself and WeirdRat, Hobo.
Oh, because I just exited that 25-minute long game early.
Yes. Yep, Hobo was the victor. He was the winner. Hobo versus Itano, who wins in a fight?
If you're
it's
playing...
a little wargame fight, if it's a little wargame fight, Hobo wins. I'm not gonna... Hobo not only wins, he could tell me what race he's gonna use and then win. It's actually not... That's one of the Hobo's strengths as a player, is that, Hobo, you'd actually be a fantastic coach, because your general knowledge of a variety of matchups and your willingness to accept the wisdom of looking into things is pretty good. In real life, who wins, Hobo versus Itano? I mean...
I don't think I have a good chance versus him.
Dude, not only would I step up to the plate, I would bring a baseball bat called my right fist. No one would be ready for it.
Let's just say the pen is not mightier than the sword.
Let's put it this way, right? Like, I'm not a big guy. I'm 6'1", tall, yes, intimidating, got that. But I'm only like 170, 175 pounds. The difference is, I'm meaner than most of you. So if we get into a fight, maybe I won't win, but I'll make sure I won't lose.
I think I would have to play dirty against him.
Oh, you definitely would have to play dirty. You'd have to have, like, sand in your fist or something like that, like...
If people want, I can do a cast of that match. The game ended up going another 7 minutes past when I ended that, and I ended up getting catapults in with the mage dragon werewolf.
JY, don't make me clap you in chat. You would not win. Dude, I have a brother who's 200 pounds and my height, and I stomp him. You don't understand, like, the willingness to win is way stronger than being just physically bulkier. Like, there's a reason, yes, there's a reason in IRL fights they have, like, weight class divisions. Like, there's a reason in wrestling it's 125, 133, and 141, because that's small, like, that number of pounds actually makes a big difference between trained people. Between someone who doesn't actually want the fight and someone who's not only, like, someone who's a smoke conductor.
Is there anything else we want to talk about?
Can you win the map You Are Garbage?
I can try. If it's anything like that micro challenge, I can win on the first try.
No, it's definitely not. Okay. Any other questions? Any burning questions that you have for myself? Any takes that you want to try and get us to make on live stream? I guess we should just... Is there really a way to counter dragons late game?
Yes, there is.
My simple answer is Ballista, but, you know...
It depends what race you're going for.
Not just Ballista, but you have to get the black powder upgrade for Ballista.
If you're mech, then Ballista completely shuts down dragons, with or without the upgrade. if you are going racks, you want to go archer, potentially mages for slow field, and some ballista, maybe with an airship. Because late game archers are more than a challenge for late game dragons, especially with slow fields. If you are going for beasts, you can counter with your own dragons. Ballistas can help, but also if they're putting too much towards their own dragons, you can win the ground game and just flat out destroy them. Since wolves, for example, are not individually very bulky, but how many shots does it take to kill a wolf with a dragon? Is it like, what?
Well, wolves have, I believe, 160 health.
So like 10 to 15 shots, is it?
Yeah. Well, that's not even the problem. The problem is that you have these things called werewolves that start off with enough armor
Yes, but
to make all of your opponent's snakes and wolves just cry.
But
Like,
if they're
but he's
going too
asking-
heavy into dragon, then that's a way to do it. Just win on
He's
the
also
ground
asking about
game.
super laking. Like, there's also micro in the dragon versus dragon fight because dragons do have a small amount of AoE. So what you do is you pull back the dragon that's being targeted, and all of the enemy dragons clump and move towards your ball of dragons, and that means that they have overlapping.
So you end up dealing more
selections.
damage. Also, if
Yeah,
you can
yeah,
get a
yeah.
concave on them.
Yeah, that's why I remember old school BBBs. You would just see these crazy pullbacks of dragons. You could win like, 4 dragons v5 if your opponent isn't microing at all, and you are. Like, it can be really, really gross.
Especially with target priority, if you move the injured away and they don't retarget them.
Yes.
Or if they're chasing an injured one and you cause them to all bunch up forward moving towards you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, no problem, neurons. PranksterGangster, I think that is.
It is
So,
Prankster. Yep.
Very nice. Very nice.
Any last minute things?
We've
last
got
minute
about
questions?
another minute or two, and then we're going to close it up. Yeah.
I'm hoping for a pretty strong showing. So far, we had, I think, from what I was looking at, a peak of 18 people watching this.
Oh, yeah.
I think the Saturday, Sundays for this are going to be hype.
Oh, definitely. And by the way, while people are taking this first week to get involved with their coach and figure out what they're going to learn and getting acquainted and all that, if you have any difficulties reaching out to your coach, perhaps you're a newer player who's watching this, and you're like, how do I find my coach? Or if you're a coach who's like, where is this player? I'm having these issues. If you're having any issues, just PM or private message myself or Hobo.
And I believe as soon as the stream's over, I think Mr. Dirty Itano Money over there is going to start giving out the golds.
Oh, of course. I've got Power 9 in my hand and gold at my disposal. I'll just pass it around. Oh, yeah, JY says join the Discord. If you don't know how to join the Discord, say something now or forever hold your peace. But you should join the Discord. Links will go inside of Little Wargame chat pretty shortly here. And I'm excited, Hobo. I am excited.
I would say today was successful so far from everyone that's been here. This is definitely something that people will be able to play in the background due to the almost devoid visuals, but take care, JY. Yes, what's up, JY? Waiting for the chat message.
JY's asking if we're gonna try and beat Decrepit Caverns.
Probably not on stream.
No, because no, not on stream. Let's just put it that way. If you've ever played that mod, you'll know why.
Take care,
All right,
Super
well,
Monkey.
with that, Lamau on stream. No, there's definitely no way. That's not ready for prime time of JY, and you know it. So with that, Hobo, I think I'm gonna cut out, and with that, I believe the stream is cut out. And look at that, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. EST. We have timed it beautifully.
I'm gonna close the stream now.